years ago anyway. Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time to come along to today's webinar. There are some familiar faces popping up on the screen. Mr. Day, I haven't seen you for 100 years. You're still looking young and vibrant. You might not feel it, but you look it, Chris. You look it.
Well, it does one's best, Chris. It's good to see you.
You always do, Chris. You always do. So thank you very much, say, for coming along this morning. We've got, I think, a really quite interesting, maybe even an exciting session on emerging talent. Emerging talent, one of those subjects that you read about and all over all of the blogs and all of the various commentators are talking about talent. And the fact that we haven't got enough of it. That's the thing. I look around at all the people coming onto this webinar. I think that can't be true. It can't be true. Talent bursting at the seams in this webinar. But clearly there is an issue when we look at the global picture. So what we're going to do today, and we're going to try and make this very interactive as well. So if you think that you've just come along to sit on a webinar and not do anything, then think again. Think about how wonderful it will be, how engaging it will be to actually start throwing some questions into the session. Hats into the ring. That's what we need. Hats into the ring. The more, the merrier. So I want to try and make it interactive. We are going to start off the first part of the webinar really to, I guess, give us some fact to chew over. So I'm going to have, first of all, a conversation with Kerry, who, for those of you that don't know, who doesn't know this, Kerry is the CEO of the Global Sourcing Association, and of course, as the CEO of the GSA, has her finger, at least one finger, probably all of them actually, on the pulse of what's going on. So be really interested to just see what Kerry's seeing and hearing and get a sense of what's going on. I'm also going to have a conversation with two people who have taken their time to come along and join us today. So Francis Church and Matt Mould. We're going to talk to both of you a little bit more and get yourself to introduce yourselves and what you do and all those sorts of things a little bit later on in the session. When we've had those conversations, then I think we'll have lots and lots for people to talk about and think about, so we can then start getting everybody else involved and see where the conversation leads us. So if all of that makes a little bit of sense on a very sunny Thursday morning, certainly down here in Wales, and over in the south of London where Kerry is, it looks sunny there as well. So let's go over to Kerry and have a chat about what's going on in the world of talent. So it seems to me, Kerry, that there is a case to answer in terms of there being a talent shortage. I guess there's always that concern that people hype these things up and they talk about there being a talent shortage, and when you start poking a stick, you realise, perhaps it's not all it's cracked up to be. So it might be useful to start off by just seeing what it is that you see, and is it the case that there is a real talent shortage?
Wow, yeah, no, absolutely. It's almost at crisis point, to be quite honest, Chris. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for posing the question, Chris. Yeah, it's there's all sorts of different stats out there, but the ones that I'm consistently quoting, because I'm hearing them and reading them numerous times, is we've got 1 million unfulfilled roles here in the UK at the moment. But of course, that's across many disciplines. Obviously the ones that have hit the news has been, truck drivers and construction, and of course Brexit has got something to say for the loss of some great talent from the country. But, if we just look at the roles of global technology and business services, we really cannot fill the positions quickly enough. So we started off this symposium with the analyst's view. And I knew the industry was growing, and I knew we were on probably the biggest economic boom we've ever enjoyed, or certainly since Y2K and .com. But the figures were absolutely startling. So the business services sector has grown by between 8 and 9% this year. And IT outsourcing is on a trajectory to have done 20% growth this year. Wow. So, yeah, and that's not based on a drop because of COVID. That's just based on, industry averages of where we were actually at. So we're talking about phenomenal amount of industry growth and a loss of talent. So, we really are struggling to fill those roles. So as a result, we had a member insight exchange, which was it's what we do when we have a member come to us and say, I've got a real challenge. Can you bring together some members of the community to discuss that? And that challenge was with a big telco, just saying we cannot keep our customer service staff on board. There's so much attrition for us at the moment, and salaries are spiraling. Can we discuss, are we doing something wrong? So we brought together a team of both buyers and providers, and it was a consistent view. And the consistent view is, yeah, absolutely, attrition is spiraling at the moment, and lots of people are leaving customer service industry and choosing to hang up their boots, is one of the sayings, if they're more mature, or choosing to change profession, or choosing to work for themselves in this new sort of like path of independent careers. So there's a very big issue on the customer service delivery side of things at the moment, and that is going to keep increasing. I think there was great concern around the table as to what we were going to do about that. If we look at the other side, so software development, we cannot find software engineers at all here, but where we normally go, to Poland or Ukraine, they're also absolutely saturated. So speaking to my partners ABSL and Soda in Poland, they have incurred 35% salary increases for their software engineers this year alone. And software engineers currently in Eastern Europe are like rock stars. They can pick and choose which projects they actually want to work on, and they're picking, they're selecting, the really cool, exciting projects with really cool, exciting brands, so the competition there is phenomenal as well. So yeah, that's a long answer and hopefully some stats. Just to show that, yes, we absolutely do have a war on talent for the delivery of technology and business services. But then we've also got a shortage of really skilled professionals in buying and sourcing those business services. So, there is a struggle and a challenge on both sides of the outsourcing or strategic sourcing equation today.
Yeah, it's kind of perverse in a way, isn't it? That when you have, I've always thought of the strategic sourcing industry as really being that part of the organisational world that ensures organisations have what they need to do what they want to do. So we've got a very vibrant community of service providers who will provide you with the resource that you need to do what you want to do. And then we have this group of people in organisations that are making sure that they're getting the resource from the right place. That's directly employing people or going out to external providers. Or nowadays, of course, we talk a lot about this open talent notion, where you can confidently recruit in individuals, in freelancers, and make up teams yourself. So it seems to me that the challenge of finding those resources is now made very much more difficult. At the same time, we haven't got those skilled professionals who are the ones that have those skills to be able to find the resource and more importantly, perhaps find the resource from the right sources, choosing whether to make or buy and all those sorts of things. So it seems to me rather perverse that we're in this situation, but in it seems that we are. One question that I had when you you were talking about one of the causes of organisations struggling with resourcing is, for me, a kind of perennial one of not being able to hold on to the resource that you've actually got. So you've recruited it in, and then you find that the churn rate is very, very high, and particularly in customer services. I think that has been the case. Do we think that that is worse now than it has been, or is it simply that it's at the same levels but exacerbated by the fact that there's not the talent pool out there that we can just continually keep dipping into?
That's a really interesting question. So I think a lot of people, have changed their mindset due to the pandemic. They've got a different work-life balance that they want to achieve, and that's driven some change. Obviously, there is the working from home dilemma. A lot of people in call centres were able to work from home, and now there is some mandates to say, no, you need to come back in. And I think that's causing a mass amount of resignation, to be honest, because why did you trust me then and now you don't trust me now? So I think a lot of people are voting with their feet depending on what sort of work-life balance they can get in their working from home scenarios and things like that. I just think there's also a really increased level of demand. So obviously when organisations mobilised very swiftly to work from home and had to change the way that they offered all of their services, and that the amount of digital transformation that we're seeing and the appetite for more and more digital transformation is going through the roof. So if we look at the size of the service providers, they are growing like topsy, that we're talking in terms of turnover, but also in terms of their employee footprint. So, Webhelp, we were speaking to them just yesterday. They've gone from 50,000 to 95,000, and they're one of the smaller players. You look at the trajectory for somebody like TCS. I think they're going from 350,000 to, in the next 2 years, 500,000 employees.
Wow.
So the level of demand is significant. So clearly, you've got both things. You've got people leaving, but we need more talent coming on in because the industry is growing. So it's a double whammy that we're experiencing at the moment. But one thing that I omitted to say that I really want to make sure I do get across is there is talent available in other regions around the world.
I was going to ask.
So where we sit here, and go, oh my God, we've got no access to talent. It's a crisis. I'm speaking to my friends and colleagues in South Africa that are going, we've got the highest adult unemployment we've ever suffered at 35%. It's a crisis. So I was just speaking to we've got an alliance of the leading industry associations for this industry around the world called the Global Technology and Business Services Council. And there are 12 leading associations in this alliance. And I know that our friends IAOP in the US, they are suffering in exactly the same that we're suffering. There is just not enough talent to fulfill on the work. But we're talking to South Africa, huge issue. So if anybody needs access to customer service resource, they've got it available tomorrow in abundance. But then if we're talking to they've got a similar problem to South Africa. They have got an abundance of recently reskilled digital workers that are available. So we, as a council, the first thing that we're going to do is create a global heat map that gives an overview of what resource, where the deficit is and where the surplus is of talent for the industry on the service delivery side. And then obviously look at whether we can actually make that a lot more joined up. But the first step is to go, well, this is where we have got resources still available globally. And I think it's really important, the arguments we used to have of, offshore British jobs going overseas and all of that sort of stuff. If we don't tap into that global resource, inflation over here is going to carry on spiraling. It's a very basic macroeconomic debate. We need access to all of that global resource right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's again been an ongoing discussion, isn't it? That offshoring often becomes highly politicised, and I think that we can see how dipping into that, what essentially is an infinite pool of resource. It's the entire entire globe, if you have the skills, and I think you do need the skills. You do need to, it's not just a case of picking up the phone and sort of speaking to somebody in South Africa and saying, tomorrow you can start to provide me a call center facility. There's clearly some process that we need to go through. There's risks that we need to be concerned about, and again, that takes us back to the need to have people who are skilled in being able to procure that sort of resource, and not only procure. I think it's also a case of being able to manage those resources, and perhaps, I mean, you alluded to it earlier, but it is about trying to retain not only those people that work directly for you, and I think that is a big issue. I think it is about organisations looking at how they manage people, how they design jobs, how they design the whole process that they are using to deliver the service, so that it provides people with job satisfaction. It provides people with jobs that they actually do want to carry on doing. But I think also we've got the issue of managing relationships with organisations. And that's, I think, about how we can develop our skills to manage relationships, supplier relationships, so we can be more confident to go out to the market and look for other organisations providing those services, wherever they might be. So, there are particular skills that we need to manage distributed teams, and I think we perhaps need to do more work in trying to improve those skills, so that we can dip into this bigger pool of talent. So, Kerry, do you see that going forward this is going to be a continuing problem? Are the commentators saying that, look, in the next few years this is going to get actually better? So this is a short-term thing, it's a year or two, it's been driven by the pandemic issues, or is this something that people say, no, there are some systemic issues that are likely to create real pressures, particularly if we don't do anything?
Oh God, there's two answers to that. The systemic issues is our national curriculum. If we don't overhaul our national curriculum, then we are, we're trailing other countries. It's just absolutely shameful, the way that we're educating our children today. But I'm not going to get too political. I'm going to stick with the subject.
Steady.
What we've got here, and that is, the role of the strategic sourcing professional, which sadly has always been an accidental profession. Hardly anybody I've met has gone, whoa, I can't wait to finish school and become a sourcing professional, or I'm studying outsourcing or sourcing at university. That still very, very rarely happens. So we've got that issue, but we've got the issue that the role of the strategic sourcing professional is changing on a pin. So you're talking about it's all about relationships. It is absolutely all about relationships, but we're talking about relationships within now very complex sourcing ecosystems. So it's no longer, have I got a relationship with my tier 1 service provider and I can manage that? More likely you're going to have relationships with thousands of different, well, not thousands, but you need a team that's got relationships with thousands of different providers, and they've all got very different cultures. You've got the culture of a startup and a scale up, and then you've got the culture of a tier 1 service provider. You've got to be able to manage very different types of relationships and very different types of cultures, and drive very different behaviours from those different types of organisations. But at the same time, you need to be looking at your ESG agenda. This is massive now, and we've been speaking a lot about ESG, but it's absolutely the responsibility of the sourcing professional as part of a bigger team, but a huge amount of responsibility on the sourcing professional to understand the impact that their supply chain's going to have, not just their supply chain, but their supply chain is going to have on their ESG rating. So you've got those things. And then you've got the whole area of use and adoption of, technologies. So, in the past, and this answers the question you posed before talking about systemic. systemic issues. In the past, service providers were being accused of not automating fast enough because, automation was going to cannibalise their FTE models and hurt their revenue streams. Right now, those service providers that aren't automating at speed are the ones that are going to be suffering the most because they don't have the talent to fulfil on the services that they are committing to deliver. So yeah, the sourcing professional really needs to be going at any new RFP or looking at any arrangement they've got with an automate first mindset, and needs to understand, how all of that works. And to be honest, and this is my real concern for the industry, if between the sourcing, the enterprise buyer and the service provider, we don't actually manage this growth and this opportunity really well, the industry is going to go back to where it was 5-10 years ago. And that is an industry that was tarnished in the media as delivering late and over budget, and it all being about fat cats racing to get the projects and really not delivering the services and the quality. And I really, really do not want to see that happening. And we are in a position of being able to ensure that that doesn't happen. We're mature enough as an industry now to work to realistic objectives, alignments and projects, and to actually deliver those properly.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a really interesting point that you make, and this notion of having lots of suppliers to manage, and also getting an understanding of those roles that organisations require, and how those roles are changing. I sort of stat McKinsey came up with that that 30% of the organisations that they surveyed said that they expected over the next 4 or 5 years, so very short timescales really, that a quarter of their job roles will have been disrupted, will have been changed by all of the new things that were going on, ESG and also the automation revolution, things like AI in particular that are all coming on stream. So it's a fascinating area. I think that we've probably given the gang a bit of fat to chew over. I think there's a fair bit that we've got there. So if we everybody can clear their diaries, we're not going to do an hour. We're going to do the rest of the day. So we're not going to stop at 10:30. We're going to do the rest of the day on all of those things. No, sadly, can't do that. Got to stop at 10:30. So everybody's got a Zoom call after 10:30. So let me thank Kerry very much for that fascinating insight into what's going on. Clearly, there is an issue. It was clear as well that an important antidote, an important solution, is really looking at how we can bring more people into the industry to help to solve those problems of sourcing. So can we find people who are going to choose to be a strategic sourcing professional? They're not going to have a Barbie doll, they're going to have a strategic sourcer as their doll for Christmas. So perhaps we could get those going. So to talk about that a little more, I wanted to turn to Francis and Matt to sort of understand a bit more from two people who were shortlisted for the GSA Rising Stars Award this year. So people who have made already considerable progress as strategic sourcing professionals, and I think have an insight into what it is. What is this strategic sourcing role that we talk about, and what do people do, and why is it fun? Why is it exciting? Why is it interesting? Why are you doing it, Francis and Matt? Why are you doing this? So let's see if we can get more of an understanding, and perhaps that'll give us some real insight into what we need to do in order to get more people in. So Francis, let me turn to you first. So just by way of introduction, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about who you're working for and the role that you do, and I'm particularly interested to understand, how did you get there? Where have you been? How did you end up in the role that you're in, the career to date?
How did I get here?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Frances Church. So I'm a sourcing advisor at KPMG. So at the moment, I'm consulting with clients specifically in the technology sector, and advising them on how to better source technology and achieve their strategic objectives, essentially. But my journey, how did I get here? So I studied journalism at uni, so it was not at all kind of where I've ended up. After uni, I went and worked in marketing for a year, and I was traveling in different places, but I wanted to get into a bit more of the nitty-gritty of the business. So I got a graduate scheme at BT, and I actually got placed in procurement. I didn't know what it was. I looked it up on Google.
Were you pleased at the time, Francis? Were you pleased at the time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was great to be part of such a big organisation, and there was so much opportunity at BT. It was also a really exciting time to join because they just bought EE, so there was a lot of change happening in the business.
Yeah.
And yeah, I fell into procurement. As Kerry said earlier, it's an accidental profession. But yeah, I worked in sourcing across a lot of categories, and I kind of landed in marketing for a while, in marketing procurement. And I worked hand in hand with our chief marketing officer, delivering big strategic objectives, a lot to do with the acquisition of EE and bringing kind of the business units together. So there were a lot of different personalities and a lot of different digital directors to deal with, which was really interesting. And yeah, that was kind of where I found my feet, I think. I love how the breadth of procurement, you work with so many different areas of the organisation, and you're really kind of tackling big strategic challenges. And obviously, one of the biggest agendas for businesses is how do they better spend their money and get more value out of the money that they're spending. That's one of the things that we do, but also it's about how do you manage risk, how do you deliver against your ESG initiatives and all of those things. So it's a great place to be really in the centre of the business, and that's what I found. So I was sourcing for BT, and then I decided that I wanted to go and see what sourcing for other clients would be like and get the variety of a consulting role. So I've been at KPMG now for just over 2 years, worked on a variety of different projects, from very strategic kind of high level sourcing strategies, how can a overall IT function deliver better and deliver more value, to negotiating contracts and big kind of networks opportunities. And I'm working on a cloud project at the moment. So yeah, very varied. But that's why I love it, because no day is ever the same in sourcing, ever.
which I think is not necessarily something that people recognise. Perhaps they see it as being a little bit dull, a little bit of a tedious job. But you know, you've brought it to life for me, for sure. It does sound a really interesting role. I'll talk about that a little more in a moment. Let me just turn to Matt and just get a sense from Matt, who is working for an outsourced service provider who provide sales services to a range of different organisations. So Matt, can you give us a sense of what is the role that you play within that outsourced service provider organisation, and how have you ended up in this role that you have at the moment?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Matthew Mould, Senior Outsourced Sales Executive at Durham Lane. Similarly to Francis, I know it's the cliche, but I did fall into the industry having done a business-related degree. So I currently work with Durham Lane, like I say. We provide outsourced sales, marketing, and also data services to a range of clients in many different industries. I myself only joined just over 2 years ago, and so I'm very, very new to the industry. But in that time, I've worked with 4 clients. I currently work with an insurtech company based in London called Viper. So we find them opportunities for sales and marketing across many different continents, and that is what I do currently. Like Francis said, one of the best things about it is the opportunity to work with many different people across many different industries on a day-to-day basis, which is one of the things that I've really enjoyed in my short time in the industry.
Yeah. And so, Francis, going back to you. So working in a consulting role, is that the idea? Is that the sweet spot within this industry? Is that something that you think is particularly good fun, or do you find it sometimes a little frustrating that you're, to some extent, you are on the outside necessarily? I mean, that's the great role of a consultant, but you're on the outside and dipping into organisations, then going off and dipping into another organisation. So what are the pros and cons?
So yeah, obviously I've done both sides of the coin, so it's quite interesting being in a consulting role. It is very different to being an industry sourcing professional. So the pros of consulting, obviously you do get a breadth of different projects and different opportunities, and they can be very broad and very, very strategic, which might not necessarily be the type of project that you would do in industry. And obviously you get the variety of different clients and different industries, so you see different problems, but they tend to kind of be the same across industries. It's just they might not know it. So it's really interesting from that perspective to work across multiple different clients and understand their challenges and kind of help them understand the journey that they can go on and try and simplify it for them, because sometimes the challenges can seem very complex, but there are easier ways and there are different frameworks and methodologies we can help them with using. I also think one of the things that's really nice about consulting is trying to kind of share that knowledge and upskill their own talent within their companies. So it's one of the things we've been talking today about, the talent shortage and kind of building that skill set. And I think a lot of it is just arming people with the frameworks and the sharing the knowledge that we have as a kind of as a organization with lots of experience across multiple clients, and bringing that into the organization for them to be able to use going forward. And I think that knowledge sharing is really important and something that I like a lot about the job. Cons, there's a lot of travel with consulting. It's better now. I would say it's much better now. But yeah, I think it's a lot more about bringing the client along on the journey with you and getting them to kind of understand their objectives and paint a bigger picture for them than they might be looking at, which is really, really interesting. And I think it depends the type of personality you are. Sometimes you might want to deliver the objectives and manage the contracts and have all that ownership over over a couple of years, but it's just a different kind of pace and a different way of delivering. But yeah, it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And Matt, the role that you've been doing it for a couple of years now, and again, some people would say, well, working for one organisation, and you can really feel that you've got some real sense of ownership of what that organisation is trying to deliver. When you are working for an outsourced service provider, you're necessarily working for more than one organisation, and so become a little bit split across all of those. So, but again, what are the pros and cons of that? Is it quite fascinating to have that great amount of variety, or frustrating?
Yeah, I think it's overwhelmingly positive. There are some cons, but I mean, firstly, the ability to work in different industries. I was currently working in the insurance industry with Viper. It's not an industry I looked at. It's something that you get to hone skills in different industries that you would have never even considered at university, or even when you started at the job. Yeah. And also, I think being an outsourced service provider, the office is full of people with different challenges, working different contracts. We've got over 40 clients here, and you get to learn from each other things that you wouldn't get even within your own projects or your own portfolio of companies that you work with. The cons are that you have to manage expectations for various different stakeholder groups. Some clients can be very demanding, and it's just about setting those expectations to a point where you can deliver at consistently, whilst also having fun and really enjoying the role and progressing as an individual.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That's really quite interesting. And if you were looking to try to advise organisations, the industry as a whole, on what we need to do in order to try to attract more people into that industry, then how do we go about that? What's the campaign that we're going to need to run, and what are going to be its headlines?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, and Kerry made some really good points actually at the start of the webinar. I think firstly, it's interesting that both myself and Francis have done business related degrees. We fell in the industry, and I think that highlights one of the issues. I think one of the really interesting ways that we're trying to combat it is we've actually made partnerships with both Northumbria and Newcastle University, being based in Newcastle. I possibly should have mentioned that at the start. And so we have annual workshop days where we go into their business related courses, and we deliver an interactive one-day workshop, which is a scenario challenge. We set them, mini team games, team tasks, and it's just a good way to introduce the industry at a really early stage. So it's predominantly with first and second years who might be then thinking of doing a 1-year internship, for example.
Yeah.
And I think businesses have got to look outside the box in those ways to just try and be proactive and on the front foot in engaging the talent at an early stage, like I say. The second point that Kerry made, which was a fantastic point, is people resigning or leaving or changing industry because of the lack of flexibility on working from home. I think it's interesting because I think you have to have a balanced approach. I think one of the great things about working in the office still is, as I mentioned a moment ago, the culture and the ability to learn from people working other projects, working other cases at the moment. And it has to have a balance between where you offer the flexibility to people where they feel comfortable, where they want to stay in the industry, but also provide a really good environment for learning and development.
Yeah, great points. Francis, what's your contribution to this campaign that we're going to set up? What have we got to do? Well, what has Kerry got to do, really? So she'll be at the heart of it. So what does she need to do and encourage everybody else to do?
There's a couple of aspects to it, and Kerry touched on one of them earlier too, about that it stems from schools. And obviously I work in technology, and that's very prevalent that it stems in schools. And I think it's not just STEM subjects. I also think there's a gender bias in schools as well from a very young age that does cause a divide. And there isn't enough kind of education on different career choices and different careers within technology, but also in sourcing and further on. I also think in universities, you might do a business management degree, but actually sourcing commonly isn't part of that. So it's not actually understood until someone leaves university and then goes into an organisation and has to work with a sourcing professional. So like Matt said, there are lots of kind of grassroots initiatives we can do going into universities and advocating and kind of getting it understood and known from university. I also think there's more we can do in schools to build kind of business development and also to build the tech skills. We do a lot in schools. We do a lot of kind of coding workshops. We have a program called IT's Her Future, and we go into schools even at primary school age and do coding workshops and different initiatives to try and get both boys and girls interested in technology and also talk about our careers. We also do a lot of pitches at universities and tell them about the type of work that we're doing, and mentoring programs with both A-level students, but also kind of first, second year university students, talking about sourcing and sourcing consulting and the different career choices that they have, and CV workshops as well, which I think are really important. The other aspect of it is sourcing is quite a small industry in the UK. Lots of people will know each other in sourcing, and you'll have a lot of kind of mutual connections. And I think that that's a really important thing that we should draw on, especially for new, fresh talent. How can that network come together, and how can those people come together and share their experiences and share kind of their knowledge. And I think that we don't have enough of that at the moment. There are bigger events, there's things like the Sourcing Symposium, which is great, but how can the fresh emerging talent come together, build that network? Because it can be quite daunting when you first start working and you have to go to these big networking events and you don't know anyone, and it can feel really kind of awkward and difficult. So I think something to bring that community together would be a really great place to start.
Yeah, it's great thought, Francis. And if it's any comfort, I think there are people who've been going to networking events for 30 years and still walking thinking, oh God, I'm going to go and talk to I'm going to go and talk to these people. So I'm not sure how many people still relish the old networking. Actually, I do. I always quite like walking around chatting to people, but that's just me. I think more than anything. I just wanted to bring Kerry back in because the GSA have been suggested this idea of an emerging talent forum, and it might be, given Francis's comments, it might be a nice segue really into talking a little bit about what the GSA's ambitions are for this emerging talent forum.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, yeah, I don't want to be too negative about the industry. I've been working in this industry for years and I do actually love it, but it's not without its faults. And I would say inherently in the past, for an industry that's supposed to be all about partnering and collaboration, we've been probably a fairly uncollaborative industry and maybe a little bit too selfish on the way through. But I'm pleased to say I do see there being a ground shift there. So I think the pandemic has done a whole host of positives as well as negatives on the way through, but a whole host of positives for our industry and on the mindsets of individuals. So we're now feeling at last this really positive groundswell of community spirit, collaborative spirit, and actually kind of wanting to give back. You know, the whole ESG subject and the S in that, the social responsibility piece. We're seeing a lot of enthusiasm, but also you know, desire, but also a responsibility to start giving back to the industry and companies within their industry and employees within their industry, rather than just looking what's directly on their own doorstep now. So, you know, what we're doing, what we're aiming to do is create a community of ambassadors. So these are the more senior professionals within the industry that are willing to do these roadshows with us. So what we're aiming to do is create a number of different partnerships with different universities, where we can go on in and actually give an overview of the industry, where it's going, what the opportunities of careers in this industry are. But of course, I don't want it to just be me doing a roadshow on my own. I would like to see industry professionals from all walks of life, you know, just be willing to just do one. You know, if we had a team of 20 to 30 individuals and somebody was willing to just do one of these roadshows, I mean, that would be obviously, you know, speaking to, you know, several thousand students about the opportunities in sourcing. So that's the senior ambassador side of things. And then, yes, we are launching our GSA's Emergent Talent Forum, and that is going to be completely free and open, obviously, to anybody interested in getting into a career in sourcing or already in a career in sourcing. And it's going to be opportunities to meet when we can, and hopefully that's going to accelerate. But there will be lots of online forums. So we're going to be doing sort of a Emergent Talent Forum session on a monthly basis, where we'll be looking at different topics, you know, to upskill, share concerns, share successes, and hopefully, you know, have the emergent talent sharing their experiences with the rest of the emerging talent, and be a really nurturing forum and body to help individuals in this industry flourish. So that's what we're aiming to do, and I'm sure I've already got the commitment of Francis and Matt to start driving that that agenda, and lead that forward for the GSA. So it is really a case of just getting the word out there that there is this body, there is this community, and it's super friendly and super open and transparent, where people can really share what they're seeing and their insights, their concerns.
Grand, thank you. I'm sure that everybody's really going to throw themselves into that. I see Charlotte has got her hand up, wants to throw her hat in the ring. Charlotte, what are your thoughts?
Hi, so I actually work for KPMG as well alongside Francis, and I was just reflecting on, I think it was Matt earlier was talking about the fact that he went into universities and kind of ran case studies and how engaging that is. I was just going to share my experience because I didn't leave university too long ago, 3 years, but feels like yesterday. And I remember going to quite a few of these kind of interactive sessions, but particularly with like strategy consulting firms, and they do it really well. Like they have quite an established way of delivering these kind of practice case studies and like getting people involved, getting people interested. And I think the reason so many people are drawn to that kind of thing is because they feel they kind of understand what it is that the profession, like what you do in strategy consulting and the kind of problems you encounter. So I was just thinking about when you're running and going to these kind of, I can't remember the exact terminology you use, but when you're going out to these universities and speaking to people, as well as getting professionals to share their views, I think it's really important to actually give a kind of case study type exercise to people and actually challenge them and say, like, you may not be a sourcing professional yet, but like, this is the kind of problem you'd encounter. Can you have like a little think about it? What can you already bring to the table from what you've learned? Because a lot of, like, I came from a geography background, but there are transferable skills everywhere, right? And getting them to see that they can do it and it's something that they can bring their own skills to, I think is really valuable and engages them in a different way.
Yeah, Charlotte, thank you so much for that. That's just a fantastic thought, because I think you're absolutely right. Going around and presenting what the industry is about, but more importantly, bringing it alive. Trying to give people things to do so they understand that. When I've been delivering training programs around sourcing for a long time, and it is a complex thing. There's lots of elements to it. There's the strategic side to it. There's what we call the make and buy, of course, and then there's that whole kind of contracting and trying to select suppliers and select clients as well. If you're on the service provider side of things, there's transitioning a service which can be highly complex, can be global from where it is to where it needs to be. And then there's that whole thing about how do you deal with the relationship going forward. And of course, over the past couple of years, we've had the pandemic to contend with, which threw up massive relationship problems. When I remember somebody last year saying, we had this massive call centre that was supporting this organisation and we were running it for them, and they phoned us up and said, do you think you could just put it on ice for a year or so? Because we're not, he was an airplane business, so we're not flying any planes. So we actually don't want this call centre that we've contracted to you to provide. So that the two organisations have to sit down and work that out. How do you do that? It's a fascinating but very real challenge, very real problem that people have had to solve. So there's lots of things that we have to try and do, and I'm sure that we could bring it to life and maybe bring a lot more people into the industry. I was just thinking I'd like to think that it was just only yesterday that I left university. It feels like it was the day before yesterday, I think. I'm just looking at Chris Day as well, I just wonder, Chris, whether you have any thoughts about how we might be attracting people into this industry, both on the working for service providers and also working within organisations as sourcing in sourcing roles. Any thoughts?
Well, I think one thought is we must be doing something right already, really, because I think it's it's quite encouraging. I have to say, very encouraging to hear Matt and Francis and Charlotte talking about their experiences and being, I think, very good advocates for what they're doing. I think as they were talking, what I was wondering was, to what extent do they feel supported in their careers? When I look at Glassdoor and things like that, particularly in the consultancies, I have to say, which I did work in for a period as well. Some of the feedback isn't that positive. It's a case of, I feel quite bullied. I'm under a lot of pressure. I don't always feel like I get the chance to sort of almost turn around and have a life. And there is that sort of slightly up and out culture. You're in a pyramid that's always moving upwards, but it's refining as it goes forward, and there's only so many slots for people to fill into. And I thought that would be one thing. It would be good to hear about how you feel, both of you and Matt, in your organisation, about how you feel you've been looked after, I suppose, and whether or not you feel like you're actually gaining anything that is a sellable qualification. Because I think one of the things that you touched on, Chris, was, I think you've spent a lot of time training and educating people in outsourcing, including myself and the team that I had at the Phoenix Group. And I thought it was a very, very valuable exercise, actually. And it gave us I think it just gave us a lot of confidence when we went out to talk to people after that we felt like we knew a bit more about what we were supposed to be doing, which is always helpful. But I think, if you go up through accountancy or you go through law or you become a dentist, that sort of training is just all part of your professional career development, and it goes on for a long, long time. Outsourcing's still, I think, somewhere where we've not quite necessarily made that step of being quite clear what it is that you need to have in order to be considered to be good at it. Anyway, so that was one reflection. I don't know if you guys wouldn't mind. I don't know whether this call is being recorded, so feel free to say what you really think about it.
Yeah, Matt, what's your
Yeah,
response?
really.
Are you treated
Really,
well?
Yeah, really interesting question. So I agree there are a lack of necessarily progression opportunities in some areas of the industry. Working with many different clients, one of the real big bonuses is that I get to work in industries that I really enjoy. So at the moment, in the insurance industry, I'm actually working towards my Chartered Insurance Institute certification, which allows me in a deeper level to progress that industry knowledge and work with more insurance, specifically insurtech companies in the future, and I think offering opportunities to do that with clients is a really good incentive, because more insurtech companies off the back of it will be interested in working with Durham Lane as an outsourced service provider, because we've got the real knowledge in that industry, and we do it across various other industries as well. So I think just offering the opportunity to develop is absolutely paramount to keeping staff.
That's very interesting. And is that being supported, sponsored by the company? Do you have to pay part of it? How does it work?
No, so that's funnily enough, that's actually being completely paid for by my client. I've got built up a fantastic relationship with them over the last few months. And so I'm actually sitting, no pressure, but I'm sitting the exam next month, or one of the exams next month, with the CEO, the COO, and the CCO of the client, so who've all been in the insurance industry for 20 years. So no pressure.
I think I'll probably feel the pressure.
I was going to say, I think that the pressure is all on them. If you end up passing it, they all fail. So Egg, I think, is kicking around.
Yeah.
We've only got a couple more minutes on the call. So, Francis, have you got any quick thought about that?
Yeah, and it's interesting, kind of the up and out point you mentioned, Christopher. But yeah, I think from my perspective at KPMG, it's been amazing. We've got a really good kind of team culture, and that's what's really nice about consulting. You kind of go onto a project for 6 months and your team, and you work together very, very tightly and closely for that period of time, which is really, really nice to kind of get to know your colleagues on a much more personal level. And sometimes in industry, you're a bit more of a lone wolf, and you manage your category. That's what you look after, and you don't necessarily have a kind of big team around you. So I really like that about it. The other thing in KPMG is a lot of support for career progression and growth, not just promotions, but also kind of growth in your role, and breadth of understanding and breadth of kind of knowledge. So we are sponsored through SIPS if we want to. SEMA is quite a common qualification you can take as well. But then there's also a lot of coaching, and everyone has mentors at KPMG. We also do a kind of downstream mentoring program. So I would go and mentor a director, which is really interesting and a great way of doing it. And there's a lot as well on diversity and inclusion, and a much bigger focus on that, which I think is really important. So it's great from that perspective. And I don't feel that up and out culture at KPMG at all. It's a lot more nurturing, and it's all about kind of growth in role, which I think is really important.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's a really strong point to really end on. Within the GSA, there's lots of things that are being done to encourage people into the industry. Indeed, I mean, the GSA was set up 1987 in actual fact, so it's been around for a long time, and it's one of its fundamental roles is as an advocate for the industry, not just for the service provider side, not just for those people that buy it. It's for all those people that contribute. So service providers, buyers, and also the advisories, the KPMGs and the law firms, all of whom come together within this industry. And the GSA really are there to try to highlight the fascination of it all, why it actually does attract lots of people. We do think of it sometimes as being on the periphery, but when you start scratching the surface, you realise that there's a lot of people that are contributing to strategic sourcing in lots of different ways. So the GSA is going to continue to do that. I've got a particular role in supporting the GSA in delivering training programs for those people, particularly on the buy side, but actually on both sides of the industry and advisories as well, and created a set of online courses now that you can dip into, as well as workshops and all the rest of it. So there's lots of things that the GSA are looking to do to try to attract new people into the industry, and also to develop people who are in the industry at the moment. So going along the lines that Chris was talking about, and developing confidence often amongst people, validating knowledge that they actually perhaps already have. So thank you so much for taking the time to come along. Matt, you've got a last thought?
Yeah, just absolutely fantastic to see the GSA being really proactive in it. I think the more uptake and more engagement from leaders in the industry can only be a good thing. Great.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your time again today. I wish you an enjoyable and fun rest of the day. Hopefully the sun is shining on you. The sun shines on the righteous, apparently. So with that thought, I will see you again at the next GSA webinar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Well done, guys. Well done.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.